I want to be that teacher that I would want for my kids is I want my children's teachers to see them for their unique strengths, to see them for who they are, and not like, oh, they've got a designation. Oh God, here we go again. Like I've seen people like that, and it just destroys me.
Welcome to SELINTalks by SELINTalks. I'm Shruti Verma, and today we're joined by Josh, a dynamic educator who has dedicated over a decade to transforming the way physical education is taught. Josh is not only a teacher, but also a speaker and a consultant who helps other educators elevate their instruction and student achievement through impactful assessment strategies. With a keen focus on making learning participatory and student-centered, Josh has been on the front lines of education innovation, bringing fresh approaches to student engagement and learning outcomes. Today, we'll dive into his transformative experiences, explore his methods for integrating technology in physical education, and discuss the challenges and the successes he has encountered all the way. So let's get started and welcome Josh. Thank you so much for being here, Josh. How are you feeling today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me today.
Awesome. So, Josh, starting off with something a bit fun. Could you share an unexpected moment or a lesson from your career that has really changed how you approach teaching physical education?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd call it fun. I would say it's definitely one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had as a teacher. And it happened pretty early on in my career. I think it was in my third or fourth year teaching. And there was a particular student, and when I tell the story, I call him Chris. That wasn't his name, but I call him Chris. And he was a child who it was in high school, secondary school, and his behaviors were just really bothering me. He was just really wasn't nice to other people. He was quite arrogant in his behaviors. And so rather than trying to work with him and understand how those behaviors were impacting himself and the class and others around him, I did what I saw happening when I was a student is I started to use the grading process to penalize him. I started to take scores off and marks off of his behaviors and use that for reporting purposes. And I thought that was just the way things were done. And we had a parent-teacher interview, and I noticed that Chris's mother signed up. So I was quite excited because I was like, okay, I'm gonna let Chris's mother know what's happening. I've got my information here. And Chris's mother came in, and I was excited because not just because she was there, but also Chris was there with her. And I was just like, fantastic. I'm going to get him in front of his mother. So we had some superficial conversation. And then Chris's mother asked me, why did Chris get 75% on his first report card? And Chris was a pretty high level athlete. But I pulled out my grade book, and I had all the different categories with the different weights that they were out of. And I showed her the numbers, like he got like 5 out of this and 10 out of this, and it all added up to 75. And she looked at me and she goes, okay, that's nice, but what does that have to do with what he's learning in class? And in that moment, I froze because I realized I don't know how to answer that question, because I had, is he on time? Is he in appropriate attire, appropriate clothing? Is he behaving nice to others? And I couldn't answer Chris's mother what he was learning in class or how he was doing. In that moment, I was just kind of stuttering and saying things and tripping over my own tongue, so to speak. And I felt my eyes drifting towards Chris, and I'm feeling it right now. I was like, don't look at him. And my eyes are drifting over to him, and I see him smirking. And it just made it worse for me. I'm so like, oh my God, what's going on here? And after that conversation, I had a few more interviews with other parents. I don't remember what happened. I totally blacked out. I had I figured like I was fine, but my mind just shut down.
Yeah,
I had nothing
figured.
to say to anybody else. I had a long commute home on public transit. So in Vancouver, BC, where I was living, you take like the subway or a sky train and then a long bus ride, but it's a cold and rainy night. And it really mimicked how I was feeling in that moment, just so dreary and ugh. And what happened with that is I realized after I got over, my ego was hurt and I felt foolish. I felt inept as a teacher because I couldn't answer the most basic question. What is this child learning and how are they doing? I realized that I needed to make a change. If I couldn't change my practice, then I couldn't stay as a teacher. And that began my journey into kind of changing and transforming who I was in my approaches. And it was pretty humbling. Like, wow, there were some practices and some approaches. I'm like, I can't be doing this. I didn't know anymore because these are things that I had seen and things that people around me were doing. And I was pretty young in my career. But I usually go to that story because that is the definitely a pivotal one in my career that's kind of led me to where I am many years later.
That's amazing. I mean, the entire story actually had, shifts. I thought when you started, it's going to be fun. It started with fun, and then ended up you learning a lesson. This is fantastic. Do you think
Thank you.
this experiences like these have actually deeply influenced your assessment strategies?
Oh, without a doubt. I look back, I mean, that was around 18 years ago. And I look back in those 18 years in terms of like what I'm doing now and what I did then. And I don't hide from it because that's part of my journey. That's been part of who I've become as a teacher, which is one of the reasons I really enjoy working with other teachers in schools to help in this area. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And not everybody's going to have a Chris type experience like I had. And I hope that they don't, because it was pretty horrible. But I look at it now in terms of my presence as a teacher then was really kind of here's what we're doing in class, organizing activity, standing back and watching. And those who weren't participating for any reason, perhaps they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't know what was going on. I never gathered that information. I just looked to see what was going on. And that's the information I would use. But now it's just completely different. Now it's like clarifying what are we learning over this time period? And here are some success criteria. What does success look like? Demonstrate, model, having the students kind of develop or practice their skills and then working with them individually or in small groups to like, here's where we're at and here's how we can move forward. And then even asking them like, where, based on this criterion, what you're seeing or what you're noticing yourself, where do you think you can go next? Just very different practices now that really focus the center of everything I do on the students and their learning versus earlier, I just got to get kids busy, get them active, and then in that approach, it's what do you do from an assessment point of view, if you can call it that, is what do you see very quickly, which is usually how hard does the teacher think the kids are working, which is completely subjective. And, those types of approaches where you're just looking to see, you get an experience like Chris and Chris's mother, where you can't actually answer what they're learning, how they're doing, compared to now what I'm doing in the classes is really breaking down what are the things we're learning? How does success look like? How are we doing? I can answer those questions very easily. More importantly now, so can the students I get to teach.
That's brilliant. Actually, if the students can answer, I think that's where the entire point comes into place. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
So it's clear that you're proactive in adjusting your teaching based on student feedback as well, like you mentioned. Could you walk us through a time when a student input directly transformed one of your physical education classes?
Yeah. So this one is it's another story. I have lots of stories. I think back to the story again. I use an alias name. I'll call her Nina.
Okay.
And in my jurisdiction, most of the students don't get a qualified physical education teacher until grade 8. It could be different
Oh,
depending on where you are. Yeah, we don't have a lot of primary elementary specialists in my jurisdiction. So Nina was a student in our high school, and she hadn't had any good experiences all the way up till grade 10, and that's the class I had her in. And I know this because I talked with her and I got this information. And I remember talking with Nina, like here, or not just Nina, but the class, saying like, here's what we're going to be learning over the next little while. Here's the success criteria. And I remember looking at her because I knew Nina from other aspects of the school. She was a top A student, but you could just see when she came into the gymnasium or outside, wherever we were in PE class, the body language was just very negative. And I came to learn that was because she had a horrible sense of self-esteem, low sense of self-efficacy as a mover in a physical realm. And so anyway, I remember just like really showing like, here's what the demonstration is and here's what it looks like, and let's go out and try it. And just such this deflated, okay. And she was kind of a teacher pleaser, as she called it.
oh,
But then Yeah, that she, whatever to please the teacher, she'll just say okay, right? Even if she doesn't agree with it. But we were playing in an activity, and I'd showed them some concepts related to these types of games. And she was playing on her team against another team, and she was nailing. She was doing everything, all the different aspects of the success criteria. She was doing it incredibly well. So after her team came off, there's a natural break. I said, Nina, come on over. I said, how do you think you're doing out there? And you could just see like the body language, again, just self-defeating. And she's like, I'm not doing very well. I'm like, well, come on, let's go over the whiteboard. Let's look at the criteria that we're looking for today. And I walked her through it. I was like, do you feel you're demonstrating these things? Yes. What about this? Yes. What about that? And as I'm asking these questions, I'm noticing her shoulders hunched over, starting to come up. Her head's lifting a little bit. And then a little bit of a smirk pops on her face. She's like, I am doing those things. I'm like, absolutely. So then back out she went again with her team the next time. And I felt bad for her because she was playing, it was just the way the games were rotating. It was she playing against some of the kids on the next team who were really experienced in the activity we're doing. But you wouldn't have known it because how she was playing and participating in that activity, she was doing everything that we could ever ask. She had never done the activity much, but the criteria is very clear for her in terms of what to be doing and what she can try out there. And after the game or after that activity, same thing. Come on over, how do you do? And she's like, oh, I think I did really good. And about these things, and I was like, you're right, Nina, you are. Right. And she's just like, wow, I never thought I could do good in this class. And it's like, and I mean, her reaction wouldn't have changed what I've done, but it was just such a positive reinforcement to really keep this approach going, because any kid, no matter what their background, no matter what their experiences are, when we clarify what's being looked for, clarify a target, they can try to hit it, at least around the path somewhere. And for Nina, that was a huge thing because that was the last time she took great PE in our school. But it was a positive experience for her, which was, for me as a teacher, I can't ask for much more than that.
That's brilliant. You mentioned that a lot of students do not get physical education as a subject or as an approach till grade 8. Do you think it is important for schools and institutions to kind of integrate it at the early age?
Oh yeah. So let me clarify. They'll get a block of time periodically through the week devoted
Right.
for physical education, but they won't have a specialist necessarily. So it could be, depending on the school, you might have what's called a prep teacher. So somebody who will, if I'm teaching like a grade 2 class and it's PE time, I'll hand my class over to the prep teacher while I go do my prep. And there's not a lot of coordination. That being said, there are some brilliant examples. It's just in our jurisdiction, we don't have a lot of specialists in the younger years, which is bothersome in a lot of ways because not even just we know what the research says about this, but just anecdotally, just speaking with people, seeing kids, knowing kids, they need to be moving in meaningful and authentic ways, in ways that help them develop a sense of efficacy, but also a sense of identity with movers. And I see that in so many kids coming into our high school years who don't have that, trying to unpack with them the negative talk that they have, the negative imagery of who they are as movers. And just immediately, many of them go to, I can't do it. I'm like, you don't even know what we're doing today. Well, I can't do it anyway. I'm like, let's work with that. So yeah, absolutely is incredibly important. I just hope that one day our jurisdiction will put a bit more emphasis on that, as many other jurisdictions do.
Right. How did it begin? So what made you, pursue all of this? That is very interesting. I wanted to ask this in the first go, but yeah, what made you do this?
It's, I think the first time I got the idea in my head that maybe becoming a PE teacher would be something that was fun, was my grade 12 year. I looked at my phys ed teacher, Mr. Wood, and he just seemed like he had fun in his day. And I wasn't surrounded by a lot of adults who seemed like they were having fun in their day. So I just, talked to them and it seemed pretty cool. I liked it. And, I love the atmosphere of what we did in the gyms. And I was an athlete growing up. And when I went through my university years, got my degrees and then entered school, I realized just how different it is teaching physical education than being a student. And just like I remember as a student, I would look at myself and my friends. I couldn't tell you who else was in the class. But as a teacher, you can't do that. And so what I see now is just I actually enjoy it so much more because every child has a story and every child is on a journey and they're going to go somewhere after the class. And for me, it's kind of like a puzzle for everybody. Like, how can I work with them to create an atmosphere, an environment where they want to be present, they want to engage, but do it in meaningful ways beyond like, I got to do this for a grade. Like, what's going to be helpful here for you? Where are you at? What's going to help you grow? And for me, that's that sense of like teaching is so dynamic. It's never stagnant. Or just never stand still. It's just always, there's always a new puzzle to solve. So that's kind of what's kept me going. Yeah.
That's brilliant, actually. While you were talking about the entire idea, why you started and everything, there was a memory just that popped up in my head. I was pushed to proper physical education in eighth or ninth grade. And that was a lot of pressure is there around studies. That's quite competitive here. And my PE teacher was very strict. She was extremely strict. And like you said, it was fun for you. And I was a kid who was very pampered. I have not ever played anything. Was not even interested in running. I was a kid who would sit in the corner, probably read a book or something. So when I changed schools, and this school was very into physical education and games and different sports, it was huge. And for the first 2 months, I literally used to cry because we had to wake up. It was a residential school. I used to wake up at 5 a.m. So a pampered kid being put into an institution which is quite strict on the timing, sports, it was very difficult. But when I started, because I would cry every day. So she was kind of, after some time it was worrying. So she just asked me, why are you crying? Just tell me what is not working out. Is something hurting? And I no, I don't know. I have never done this. So she said, okay, do whatever you can. And then probably increase your threshold by even 1% every day. So if you're running like 50 meters, next day you run 52 meters, or then next day you run 55 meters. And that's when I ended up becoming an athlete after a point because of her. And that actually helped me in my studies. So yeah, all of that started coming back when you were talking about this. That's amazing.
Well, that's a great story because you can create those parallels. Like how you challenge yourself here and how you push yourself here is transferable, but it's not necessarily organic for a lot of people. They may not put those pieces together. Yeah. So sometimes you need someone to say, hey, look, doing this can transfer to here, or where else in your life have you found that you've done this? So I appreciate you sharing that story. Thank you.
Thanks to you, actually. I have not remembered this for a very long time. All right. So, like you said, there has been a lot of communication is key to your role and communicating with the students and fellow teachers. How do parents and family come onto the same page about learning objectives and achievements or feedback, assessment? Or one of the stories that you've told, how does a family actually play that role?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that one because our subject area is one that, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a lot of experiences and reactions. And in my experience, it's usually one of two, you can generalize one of two reactions. They loved it. It was a great class, or goodness, they hated it. There's some in between, but those tend to be the two. And I found over the years that a lot of parents or caregivers won't take physical education as serious as those subject areas. And it was probably in my 10th or 11th year teaching where I became a department head in our high school of physical education. And I was trying to change things up. And I remember speaking to my principal saying, can we get rid of the grades, like the percentage scale? And she looked at me, she's like, why would we do that? And I was like, well, are they really measuring anything anyway accurately? Like, can we differentiate between a 91 and a 94% student in any particular subject? But I was like, let's go to phys ed. Can you differentiate? She's like, no. I'm like, so we had a long talk and she's like, I'm okay with you doing this, but you're going to have to create something in lieu or something in place of, if you're not going to use this, what are
Right.
you going to use? So I created a system, and funny enough, it's our jurisdiction, our province is now using a very similar system. We were required to still give letter grades, but I didn't have to use percentages. But what I did is with my department is I helped lead the development of a phys ed report card. That would be an attachment with the school report card. And on it, it would indicate in the reporting period, here's what students were learning. Here are the different learning standards that we were doing. And here is the success achievement indicators. Here's how they did, with a bit more information to really try and help the parents and caregivers understand what was going on in the classes and not those necessarily what had happened 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I remember when I created the draft of the department and then getting ready to put out, we have things called our Parent Advisory Council. They're like a partner with our schools. And my principal says, I would like you to share this with them because they're probably going to want to approve it. And I was like, oh, okay. So at this meeting, all the different departments were there and they had they're going to them to advocate for money and things. And I'm just going to present, here's our draft PE report card. And I explained it to them. And they're looking at me, looking down, looking at each other. And I'm like, oh, this isn't going to go well. I just didn't get that impression. I was like, they're going to laugh me out of the room. And here's this PE guy just and I remember the head of the pack, she goes, Josh, why don't other subjects do this? And I was just like, and I'm looking at my colleagues and I'm like, I wanted to ask them, why don't you do this? And I was just like, I can't answer that. And so they started talking they were saying, this actually helps us understand what my child is doing or learning in class and what the grades, what they mean. Because we had on there, here are the letter grades, here what they mean, here's how they can be established. This is so clear for us. We wish that other subjects had this. And that started a conversation later on with other departments on how to get there. But from that came okay, let's start using this. It was going out report cards. And the conversations with parents or caregivers around how their child is doing became kind of an informed conversation. It's not of course you say how they're behaving, but here's what we've been learning and here's how we're doing. And it's a lot of times what might they be able to do to improve? Well, there's lots of things we can do, but you can have that informed conversation that centers around how they're learning and what they're learning in the class. And I found when we've done that, it has been an absolute shift in how people perceive the subject area, but also in how a lot of teachers, PE teachers, we can feel a lack of value. But through this, I've seen so many develop a new sense of pride in we are serious and there is serious stuff happening in this class.
Right.
So that's been one that's been pretty powerful.
I wish the report card that you talked about, the report, it gets implemented in various countries. Because even now we're at 2024, we call our kids 21st century, 22nd century. Even then, they're under so much pressure. But with the kids, the families are also under so much pressure. And even teachers, I think even the educators are also in pressure that students should perform in certain ways. But yeah, I will really wish that this gets integrated to other countries as well. You told me that you also, kind of speak to fellow teachers about it. How did that pan out? Were they acceptable of this? Your strategies, your assessment learnings, how was it? How was that experience?
Yeah, I accidentally started this 11 years ago, speaking to teachers. I was leading the development of a new provincial curriculum in Canada. Our education systems are done by each province. So each province has their own curriculum. And so I was leading the development of the curriculum here. And there was a provincial conference for phys ed teachers. And I reached out to the organizer and said, hey, I'm working with our Ministry of Education. I know I missed a deadline to present, but can I come in and talk or put a session proposal in to talk to people, give them an update on what's going on with the curriculum? It's the first time I've ever spoken to an audience. This was back in 2013 or 14, I think it was, somewhere back then. Oh. And I was like, I don't know how many are going to get. It was standing room only. There was over 150 teachers. And I came in with this, I look back on it now oh my goodness, the slides. Even if you were in front of it, that's how many words were on there. I didn't know what I was doing from a presentation point of view, but the information I was able to get out, I actually stopped put in the slides because there's so many questions. And from that, I just like, you know what? I actually like interacting with teachers and helping them with something. And then from that came like, hey, can you come talk to our school with this? Can you come talk to our school about this? To now where it's like, I do it as a side business. And I'm also a contract with an international publishing agency to present on assessment and grading in PE, but also in all subject areas. And it's just something that just, I don't want to say it fell in my lap because I went out and pursued it, but it was never like a thought. But now it's like working with PE teachers. When I began this, there was a lot of resistance. Like, oh, why would I have to change? But I have found in the last 5 years, particularly, that there are more people like, can I ask you this, or can you help me with this? I need to change my practice. I need to change this part of my practice, and not even just like some people ask me, do you think it's just the young teachers? These are some like very experienced teachers in the last 5 or 10 years of their career reaching out.
That's
Like,
brilliant.
hey, yeah. And it's all over the place in terms of where they are experience wise, but a lot of people in the last half of their career are like, I want to make a change. And so I work with a lot of them just to like, where are you at? What are you currently doing? And I give some foundational, some principles around assessment and grading. And it's amazing to see the light bulbs popping on in their brain.
I'm
They're like,
sure.
oh, right. And it's because it's something like as a phys ed teacher, we'll all share common experiences. And I can't speak for post-secondary schools, universities across the world, but I know a lot of people I speak with, my own experiences, assessment and grading were not talked about very much at all, which is
Yeah.
alarming given how important it is to the whole profession of teaching.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, okay, oops. So yeah, it's just been something that for the last, like I said, last 10 years, I just gradually taken on more to now it's almost like a second job with my full job of teaching. It's nice that they're married. It's just something I really enjoy doing because the questions are always so rich. And working with departments or schools to, especially over time, to like start something, implement practice, come back. How do we grow? For me, that's incredibly rewarding.
I'm sure it must be. I mean, that's like a wave that you have started.
Yeah, thanks.
No, when you think about it, because when we were talking initially over LinkedIn, when I was going through, I was really intrigued that assessment and feedback and all of these things combining with physical education. This is not talked about. Physical education is just taken as a side subject for grading, like you said. People don't take it seriously, be it students, even if they are, there is a very small percentage of people who take it seriously. But you're doing so much in this, and you have actually made a wave. It's brilliant. I'm
Thank
just
you.
not, saying it just because I'm really, really impressed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is something I feel passionate about. I've always felt as a teacher. I have two young kids, 7 and almost 5. And so thinking about their experiences just continues to fuel my passion because I've always wanted to be the teacher that I would want my kids to have.
Wow.
And when I hear other teachers come to me or bring up questions around like, I don't feel like I am doing good anymore. I've felt that. And I'm like, too harsh for ourselves. But there are ways like what's there. And more often than not, the conversations always come back to I don't feel competent in assessment. I don't feel competent in the grades. And those, because you're right, they're like the taboo subject, don't talk about it. And it's been going
Hmm.
on for years. And, this is also throughout lots of the research out there saying it's like it's a topic we don't talk about, but it's something that's hindering our profession. And it only makes us better teachers. So I just think about like how we can re-energize ourselves as teachers and try to create, those engaging and exciting experiences for the kids, so that learning and playing aren't seen as two opposite things because they really are symbiotic and they can promote and enhance each other.
No, I agree. I agree. And I think that the highlight of the podcast is that phrase that you said. Like, you wanted to be a teacher that your kids would have.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And it's actually a great approach to function from. Not a lot of, I mean, there are people whose passion is fueled by personal agendas, but then there has to be something bigger than yourself, right? I always say this, that whatever you're working on should be bigger than you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, okay. So, last but not the least, with your forward thinking approach, all of the stories and your experience, what are your thoughts on future integration of technology into physical education? Are there specific innovations that you're eager to explore?
Yeah, I have been, I think largely because of the structure of like the class I teach in the gymnasium. It's usually big blocks that block out a lot of Wi-Fi. Where I'm going with that is e-portfolios is something I've tried, but haven't been able to do well just because sometimes the signals Wi-Fi is not going, or you can't get access to the tech pieces. I know some schools have it for everybody, but the schools I work in don't. So I still do a mix of, like, we have Chromebooks with a mix of paper stuff. I would like more things to go online, like an e-portfolio, so kids can, kind of collect things as they go and then present their best evidence of learning. It is definitely something I'm looking forward to. I know everyone's got a phone. I'm just trying to find that sweet spot of using tech without being too demanding and too distracting and I've seen some really good things just in my locations, my context. I just haven't found that this is it. This is the way to do it. So that's kind of like something I'm always looking to do. Like, okay, how can I bring tech in? Because I mean, tech is everywhere and the phones are there, but just really trying to figure out what is the way that's going to be it's going to be disruptive, but it's productive disruption, without being, oh, no one charged these things, or, oh, someone's phone's not plugged in. It's just, I think, just trying to make it more organic than it's like, oh my goodness, there's 30 minutes gone.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think everybody of us are trying to find that sweet spot with the tech. Yeah, I think you've phrased it very nicely. One more thing I just wanted to ask. It's from a personal point of view. How do you work with neurodivergent kids?
That's a great question. My son is neurodivergent, and I always say to people, even before my son was born, is we have information, we have paperwork, files on these kids. It's very helpful. I'll always go to the kid first. And if the kid can't answer first in terms of like I don't go up first. I meet him like, what do I need to know about you? But I develop that relationship with them. I find out about who they are as people versus only relying on the forms that we get. If they have an educational assistant, like if the kid can't speak or has other challenges, I just like, what do I need to know? I'll always communicate with home. Like, and again, this goes back to I want to be that teacher that I would want for my kids. Is I want my children's teachers to see them for their unique strengths, to see them for who they are, and not like, oh, they've got a designation. Oh God, here we go again. Like, I've seen people like that, and it just destroys me. And so, like, all these kids, like I said earlier, all these kids have a story. All these kids can succeed. The more I know about them, the better that we can co-create an experience and an environment that's going to help them want to participate. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah,
no, because this is quite personal, and like I said, that there are things that have not happened in years, and now it's taking a turn especially when it comes to neurodivergence, because a lot of kids, they end up growing up as undetected or undiagnosed adults with different neurodivergence or different challenges, and it feels great that there are teachers such as yourself who are working towards it, but there is still a lot of awareness that we need to do from whatever work or whatever practices that we do. I love the idea that you should go to the kids first, and yeah, I think that brings up a lot of confidence for the future generation.
yeah.
Lastly, is there a message that you'd want to tell other educators out there who'd be watching this podcast of us?
Well, yeah, self-care is so important. I know that's said all the time. Like taking care of yourself, because this is a job. I shouldn't say it's not a job. It is. You get hired, you get paid, and it's eventually you leave for some way, but it's so much more than that. And the more we take care of ourselves, the more we keep our energy flourishing, the more we'll be present. And I think one of the things that I have found with that is to really form connections or networks with people, um, that in times when I'm feeling deflated, when I'm feeling a lack of energy, like those connections are tremendously helpful because I can just reach out and like, I am struggling. I can't get over this challenge I'm having. And then they can help. They don't see me in the weeds. Like they don't know the challenge I'm going through, but they can see the bigger picture and they'll say something. And it's like, thank you. Like I can see it from a different angle. So yeah, I just, keeping yourself as energized as possible, but forming that social connection, because especially in phys ed where we tend to teach a lot together, it's also incredibly draining, and we isolate a lot. So that's another reason why I really enjoy working with people, is just forming those connections because they're incredibly helpful.
It is. Thank you so much for such an insightful conversation. I really loved it. I love the work that you're doing. And I hope you
Yeah.
continue. I hope your ideas, your methods go all around the globe because you're doing such a fantastic job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just like that, we're at the end of a fantastic episode with Josh. Thanks, Josh, for sprinting through those insightful strategies with us and giving us real workout on transforming physical education. We have learned, we have laughed, and most importantly, we're leaving inspired to keep our education spirits high and our student engagements even higher. Make sure to join us next time on SELINTalks for more such discussions that are sure to keep you on your toes. Until then, keep stretching your minds and broadening your educational horizons with us here at Selling Club. See you in the next episode.